No reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton Tonight. They're coming for her already, folks. Instead of grilling the likely next PM on policy, the MSM last night wasted time quizzing Liz Truss on leaked half-a-decade-old out-of-context comments about the need for British productivity to increase.
What we need from workers is more graft. Do you stand by that now?
The point that I've always made is what we need in this country is more productivity.
So why is the left determined to make ambition a dirty word by vilifying Truss for extolling the virtues of great British graft? I'll pull apart The Guardian's flop so-called scoop in my digest next, before getting the views of my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson. After an 87-year-old grandfather is stabbed to death on his mobility scooter in lawless London, are we just giving up on law and order in Britain? And what can we do about it? Former UKIP leader, border control expert and decorated ex-police officer Henry Bolton discusses the ramifications of this shocking attack in The Outsider at 9:50. As inflation skyrockets to a 40-year high of 10.1%, to small businesses, which seen their bills rise by over 1,400%, most of them at the moment, are they the forgotten victims of the cost of lockdown crisis? That's our big debate at 10. And sticking with the subject, is it wrong to question the apocalyptic nature of the BBC's energy coverage? The Daily Mail's Stephen Glover faced a backlash after doing just that in a column on the Beeb's obsession with their, quote, favourite prophet of doom, Martin Lewis. He joins me live at 9:35. Is it any wonder that this...
The Scotland we seek is open, welcoming, diverse and inclusive, and no Tory is ever going to be allowed to change that.
So is it any wonder that that led to this?
There will be difficulties and challenges for us along the way, but Scotland will deal with them as all nations do.
After yesterday's hustings in Perth, Scotland devolved into a hotbed of hate. Has Nicola Sturgeon created a dangerous anti-Tory climate north of the border? We'll debate that and more in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Has Stonewall lost its way by embracing toxic trans extremism? Former chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality, Paul Barnes, delivers home truths to the organisation he helped establish and has watched mutate into a, quote, abused, weakened and damaged lobby group. That's at 10:20. As Sajid Javid brands reported defence diversity quotas as complete nonsense. Is the RAF's alleged rejection of white men racist? Well, our very own Spitfire columnist extraordinaire Rod Little, he's uncancelled on this at 10:40. And should cyclists be forced to observe the speed limit and carry licence plates? Grant Shapps thinks so. But what about my lineup of journalist and broadcaster Andrew Pearce, cycling rights activist Dave Sherry, and fitness fanatic Derek Evans, aka Mr. Motivator? A really good clash coming up at 9:20. As ever, I want your views on this too. I will have tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way throughout the show too. And of course, Greatest Britain Union Jackass will be named before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Like so many of you, I have been rocked by the shocking murder of Thomas O'Halloran, the 87-year-old grandfather and busker in Sadiq Khan's lawless London. Sorry, guys, I'm going to have to be on... Thomas was stabbed to death yesterday on that very mobility scooter in broad daylight. This is the 6th murder investigation launched by Scotland Yard in just 4 days. Tolerance for violent crime in London must end. You know I've been speaking out on lawless London for the past 2 years now, having been a victim of mugging 3 times myself. But this is getting worse, folks. We must demand change. Khan's not going to do it, so the new Prime Minister must. The news headlines now with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The search continues for a knife-wielding suspect seen fleeing the scene of a fatal attack on an 87-year-old man in West London. Thomas O'Halloran was stabbed to death while riding his mobility scooter in Greenford. Police described the attack as shocking and unprovoked. An image released of the suspect shows him wearing a dark T-shirt, white baseball cap and builder's gloves. Families struggling with the rising cost of living now face a rate of inflation climbing at its fastest pace in 40 years. The Consumer Price Index reached double figures, 10.1% in July. That's up from 9.4% the month before. The rising cost of food is believed to be having the biggest impact. Prime Ministerial hopefuls Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss both claim they have the formula to sort out the economy.
As I've consistently said, inflation is the greatest challenge facing the new Prime Minister. Now, I have the right plan to get a grip of inflation, to support the people who most need our help with the cost of living, and to grow our economy so that we never have to deal with this again.
What I'm going to do on this show is predict a future budget, but what I can assure people is this is an urgent issue and I will make sure it's dealt with. Ultimately, I want a high-wage, high-growth economy. The fact is we've had 2 decades of low growth in this country. I will not continue with business as usual. I will be bold in making the change we need to help people right across our country.
In news in within the last hour, a director at energy regulator Ofgem has quit over concerns that it's failing to protect struggling households during the global energy crisis. Christine Farnish says she resigned because she couldn't support a decision to recover supplier costs by raising customer prices. In an article in The Times, she claimed consumers now face having several £100s added to their bills. In response, an Ofgem spokesman said the situation has forced them to make incredibly difficult decisions. Cyclists could soon face a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit and be required to have number plates. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told the Daily Mail there should be a review of cycling rules. He's promising to create a death by dangerous cycling law that would treat bike riders exactly the same as motorists. The new law would be added to the Transport Bill, due to be put before Parliament in the autumn. Pollution warnings are in place for England and Wales as heavy rain floods sewerage systems following months of drought. More than 40 beaches and swimming pools are affected, with swimmers advised against bathing due to water being polluted by recent downpours. Parts of the UK has seen torrential rain after weeks of intense heat waves. It follows an amber warning from the Met Office for fast-running floodwater in southeast England, meaning danger to life. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The Guardian's new political editor, Pippa Crerar, thought she had quite the scoop last night. Just like her incessant exposés on Boris Johnson's private life at the Daily Mirror, which were used by the rest of the MSM to help depose the democratically elected Prime Minister, her sights are now firmly set on bringing down Liz Truss. So, it started with the leak of an audio recording of Truss, which she claims is from the time she was number 2 at the Treasury. Now, according to the hysterically written Guardian hit piece, this audio showed the likely next Prime Minister launching a, quote, astonishing broadside against British workers. Quoted in the piece is Labour's ludicrous Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth, claiming it's grossly offensive for Liz Truss to effectively brand British workers lazy. OK, so according to that, you'd think this recording must be pretty bad, right? Wrong. The leak, which is highly damaging, by the way, simply because we don't know who Truss was even talking to or in what context or why it's emerged now, But the recording certainly doesn't show what Carrera and Ashworth describe. I'm actually going to play it to you now in full so that you can make up your own mind without the ridiculous angling from The Guardian.
There's a fundamental issue of British working culture, and it's not, essentially, if we're going to be a richer country and a more prosperous country, that needs to change, but I don't think people are that keen to change that. So I think there's a slight thing in Britain about wanting the easy answers, and I think that's my reflection on the election and what's gone before it. And the referendum is like, we say it's all Europe that's causing us all these problems, it's migrants that are causing these problems, and actually what needs to happen is, a bit more graft.
So, you've heard it there in full. In my opinion, what Liz Truss was talking about is increasing British productivity. Surely that's something we should be aiming for, to increase our living standards. And I would have thought the left would actually have embraced her, saying our problems aren't the fault of Europe and immigrants. And yes, graft is bloody important. I say that as someone who has grafted in jobs to earn a living since I was 14 years old, without any connections to jobs from family members or a top education gifted to me. Graft makes the difference. Graft leads to success. The great British graft is so important for our future. But no, the British left, which seems to lack any ambition for our country, reacted with depressing doom. Watch.
Smearing British workers for the failures of Tory policies. Productivity and how hard people work are not the same thing. I mean, Shanti doesn't know what productivity means, in which case she shouldn't be Prime Minister or she's being dishonest.
She just thinks people don't work as hard. It's a total outrage. People getting up for those shifts this morning, working incredibly hard and, with respect, I would say considerably harder than the two Tory leadership candidates who are just picking fights with each other.
Is this who Liz Truss means when she says British workers need more graft?
You've got to come back for a night shift, you're earning in real terms a whole lot less than you did before, your groceries are costing more, and you find out the future leader of this country thinks you're lazy, and she says that, we're looking for easy things to blame. Well, surely blaming workers for being lazy is the easiest and sort of dullest idea of all.
She didn't do that. So good on Truss for refusing to back away from her comments when asked about them for the first time on stage at last night's Conservative leadership hustings in Perth.
The Guardian has unearthed quotes from you when you were Chief Secretary of the Treasury in 2019 tonight, saying that what we need from workers is more graft. Do you stand by that now?
Well, I don't know what you're quoting there, but the point that I've always made is what we need in this country is more productivity across the country, and we need more economic growth.
Completely consistent, even though she wasn't even aware at that point of the leaked recording. By the way, there's nothing wrong with encouraging hard work and pointing out inefficiencies so that Britain can compete on the global marketplace. It's the left that will do our country down with a staggering lack of ambition, derision of success, and a feeling that profit is a dirty word. But to respond now, my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the political editor for the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Amanda Platel, you heard the recording there in full.
Yeah.
Do you think Liz Truss said anything wrong?
I don't. And like you, Dan, I was not born in this country. People often say to me, how have you had this great career? And I say, it's because I worked really hard. And when I arrived in Britain, many people did not. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. It's not because I'm brilliant, it's not because I've got fantastic talent, it's just that I was prepared to put in the extra hours.
You've got that too, though.
Like you do 2 jobs, I do 2 jobs. Yeah. You do, you work day and night in your businesses. And I do think that there's an underbelly in this country that, the left hate us saying it, but there are some people who are just bloody lazy and who don't work hard. And there are loads and loads of people who I'd say are the majority who work damn hard. I can remember when I had a problem with my leaking cottage and I ordered a company that was sending 4 workmen to come to work over the weekend to sort it out. Only one of them turned up, and he was a Romanian. The other had read the forecast and said it might rain, so we're not coming. They're all English. And I'm sorry, but that's just a fact. And I know lots and lots of people, you know, like your team here, who are incredible. But we also know lots of people who milk the system, who don't work hard, and I'm afraid Liz Truss was addressing them, and it's only people like me, because I'm not a politician, that can come out and say it.
Only hard-working grafters on this show.
That's true.
Adam Brooks, I mean, the point is, though, she never actually said that British workers are lazy. What she said is that we've got to compete with China, so we have to increase productivity. There's lots of ways of doing that.
I think the only people that should take offence are people that know they're lazy.
The grifters.
Right, that know they're lazy, or that are playing the benefit system. At the end of the day, I believe, under Tony Blair, this country become very lazy, and he gave people a choice to work or have benefits. A benefit system should be for those that truly need it, those that desperately need to feed their families or pay their mortgage. Benefits in this country become a way of life, and that was under Tony Blair and Labour, and I feel that's what's gone on. I mean, now we need a country that is more productive than ever to get out of the hole that we're in, which we'll talk about later. We need people to work hard, which they do. But there are a specific amount of people in this country that, you know, they choose not to work or choose to be lazy.
It's not like me to quote a statistic, but the Office of National Statistics says that there's more than 13% of all the potentially working households in this country where no one works.
And we were the slowest to go back to the office after lockdowns, and that was from the Google mobility.
Still half the civil service is working
That's
from
the
home.
point. We embraced, as a country, the lockdown measures, and we're slower going back to work. And you know I've been campaigning for a long time. Get off the sofa, stop watching Loose Women in your pants, and just get back to the office, because we need that for the country. Nigel, lots of your colleagues on the left there seem to be claiming that Liz Truss has just done something terrible and derided the country in some way. Do you share their views?
Well, I mean, she certainly had a go at people. She didn't say that British workers are lazy. I appreciate that. Nor, by the way, Pippa, who's an excellent journalist, she didn't say that in her piece either.
But she also didn't say, by the way, where this leaked recording has come from and why she has published it now.
No, I would hope she protects her sources, which I'm sure she is.
But we should know the context of it, shouldn't we?
Well, it rather depends what the sources are. I mean, what they've actually done on the recording is you don't hear the people she's talking to, because that would reveal sources.
Do you think, just before we come back to your main point, I think it's a really important question, Nigel, to ask you as a political editor. Do you think it is fair game for politicians to have private conversations leaked to newspapers? Because is the concern, and by the way, I say this no matter what party we're talking about, is the concern that politicians now are going to be so worried about talking to their civil servants and their advisors because of the fear that they're being secretly recorded?
Well, I mean, if the conversations are in the public interest, and I would argue that this particular conversation is, Liz Truss is running to be our next Prime Minister. We want to know what...
She doesn't have a right to have private conversations.
Well, I mean...
What's the difference between that and phone hacking?
Well, a great deal. But I mean...
was that perhaps not hacked, that conversation?
Well,
we don't know.
Clearly...
How was it...
Did Liz Truss know she was being recorded?
I mean, I don't know any of those things any more than anybody else around here.
Then that breaches the rules.
But I don't see... I mean, phone hacking is obviously a different thing. You're actually listening in on something. This is not that. This has been leaked.
Is that not that, Nigel? Well, we don't know it's not that.
We wouldn't write anything if we didn't get leaks. We get leaks from government all the time.
No, and leaks from sources, absolutely. But you must appreciate this is a very different kettle of fish, because this is a recording, as you say.
Yeah.
The voices of the other people in the recording have been blanked out, so we have no idea if they are civil servants or political staff members or a charity. We have no idea who she's speaking to. It's completely out of context. And I do worry this is a slippery slope. We saw Pippa Crerar, and yes, she was very successful with the way that she used private damaging links against Boris Johnson to destroy his premiership. I think...
Hang on, this is what journalists do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, but I just think this is a slippery slope when politicians now feel that private conversations that they're having with their staff members or constituents could be leaked to.
Well, it depends on the conversation, doesn't it? I mean, this sounds like... And
no,
again,
it shouldn't depend on the conversation. It should depend on the method in which that conversation
if you're having a policy conversation and the press get hold of that, and that is in the public interest, that should then be revealed. I mean, it's the bread and butter of journalism.
OK.
It's what we're here for.
Nigel, is this in the public interest?
Yes, absolutely. She is running to be Prime Minister. She has said that she thinks that British workers need to graft more, to use her words. The left is not against productivity, by the way. Obviously, we believe in a prosperous Britain. But the question here...
And what did she say that was wrong in that leaked recording?
I think to disparage British workers that it's all about graft, when what it should be about is actually people working better and more efficiently and differently. And that means looking at a completely new way of working.
But that must partly be about graft.
No, it's a question of how you graft, not grafting more. So, for instance, that France does a 35-hour week, Germany 34 and a bit. They produce more than...
China, probably about 60 hours.
Well, probably. I mean, I think it's an unfortunate comparison she makes with China, which is a very different regime. But France and Germany are more productive than Britain is by having a better way of working. And suddenly, after COVID, we're presented with another way of working. Yeah. Why would we sit on a bus or a train for 4 hours when we could actually do the same job at home?
But that's from the same job is not being done. You ask anyone who's trying to get a passport or trying to get their driver's license.
And also, work from home has all of these other knock-on effects, destroying other businesses, destroying our city centres and hospitality in particular, which we're going to come to in the next hour. But look, at least, Nigel, I am glad that, unlike your colleagues on the left there, you did admit she never described British workers as lazy. And I think it was good to see that complete misrepresentation from the left, because you just can't trust, unfortunately, what these commentators say most of the time. Not Nigel Nelson, though. He's one of the decent ones. He's one of the good guys. Nigel Nelson, Adam Brooks, and Adam Patel, thank you so much. My superstar panel are here all night. But coming up, as the cost of lockdown crisis rages on, is it wrong to question the apocalyptic nature of BBC coverage and their utilisation of money expert Martin Lewis? Well, writer Stephen Glover did just that in a controversial column for the Daily Mail. He'll join me to discuss what happened. But first, should cyclists be forced to observe the speed limit and have licence plates? The Daily Mail's Andrew Pearce will go head-to-head with cycling rights activist Dave Sherry and fitness expert, the man better known as Mr Motivator, Derek Evans, to debate. I want to know what you think on this, so email me down at gbnews.uk, tweet me using the handle at gbnews. There's a poll running there too. The results and tonight's clash straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
And
Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Stephen Glover, Henry Bolton, and Rod Liddell all on the way. But it's time now for the clash. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is peddling a controversial new plan to fine cyclists who break speed laws and slap bikes with licence plates. The proposal made it to the front page of the Daily Mail last night, following concerns from ministers that civilians and other road users have been put at risk, particularly in 20-mile-per-hour residential areas, following a cycling boom. In addition to licence plates, officials want cyclists to abide by other driving laws, including mandatory insurance. Coming out swinging in the Times, Shapps said there is definitely a hardcore of cyclists who seem to think the laws of the road don't apply to them. How can it be right that some people are able to break the speed limit and bomb through red lights? The time has come to have a look at a review and potentially update laws so they apply to cyclists as well. So what are your thoughts on this? Should cyclists have to obey the speed limit and wear number plates? Let me know your thoughts by emailing dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. We've got a poll running there too. The results shortly. But to clash on this now, I'm joined by consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, fitness instructor Derek Evans, better known as Mr. Motivator, and cycling rights activist Dave Sherry. Andrew Pearce, you're not a fan of these out-of-control cyclists, are you?
I can't see why anybody would oppose having number plates on cycles. Look, not all cyclists are good. Some of them are bad, some of them are reckless, some of them are selfish. And we know that lots of cyclists go through red lights. We know that, not because I'm telling you that, Dan, but Transport for London a couple of years ago surveyed cyclists on 5 different spots in the capital, and 16% of cyclists went through red lights. Would they do that, which of course is risky, it's breaking the highway code, would they do that if they had a number plate, which means the police, CCTV cameras could pick them up? I suggest they wouldn't. I think they should also be insured, and they should also have to have speedometers on their bikes so they can't go charging through very small, very quiet areas where there's a speed limit of 20 miles an hour. Some of those bikes doing 30, 40 miles an hour. And if you get in a collision with a bike, it can be very painful. Not that I've been in one myself.
No, indeed. I mean, look, I have to say, Dave Sherry, I know you're a cycling rights activist, and I know that you like to catch out drivers. I'm not a driver. I'm a walker. I walk everywhere around London. I don't cycle, I don't drive. Let me tell you, Dave, I am nearly hit by bicycles every single day on my walk, sometimes multiple times. I'm not nearly hit every day by a car. So why do you have a problem with this crackdown on cyclists?
Well, you can't tie everyone with the same brush. You've got some good cyclists, you've got some bad cyclists. Maybe to help the situation get better, improved, maybe before you can buy a bike, let's just think out the box. Bikeability level 3 and 4 before you can purchase that bike. That should improve.
Your big thing, right? Your big thing, and talk to me about this, is you hunt drivers who are putting cyclists at risk, right? That's what you do.
I hunt bad, incompetent drivers.
And you report about 70 drivers a day?
Oh, yes. And the last one I had in court was a police officer, and even his barrister couldn't help him out. So at the end of the day, I don't discriminate. You abide by the highway code, you follow the rules, it's all good. But you want to break the Road Traffic Act, then we're going down a whole new avenue.
But then if a cyclist breaks the Road Traffic Act, I should have a right to report them, which I don't at the moment.
Well, the Road Traffic Act is meant for motorised vehicles. Cyclists are not motorised vehicles.
But you can kill.
So can pedestrians, so can horses and mobility scooters.
Andrew Pearce?
Look, come on, get with it. What is wrong with accepting that there are a lot of cyclists who are breaking the rules consistently every day? Like you, Dan, you run the gauntlet, don't you? I live in North London, you run the gauntlet. And let's face it, cyclists have been given so many more rights across the country. All these wretched cycle superhighways, digging up the road at the expense of motorists. There's been a war against motorists. Why don't we now equal it up so that cyclists have to face some of the same pressures that motorists do? Some of these bikes are hugely expensive too. But you'd have thought it was in the interest of cyclists like Dave to just get with it and accept a number plate. What difference is it going to make for the cyclist? Is it going to invade on his or her privacy? No, what it's going to do is stop them breaking the law quite so regularly.
Mr. Motivator, where do you stand on this?
I come at this from a total health perspective. There was a fight for many years to try and get as many people as we can off the road, out of cars and onto bikes. Now it's happening. We're now starting to say, okay, we should put some controls on it. In many ways, that should have happened the other way around. Because there's so many health benefits by getting people on their bikes riding, and we've got to applaud that. We've got to be careful how many rules and regulations we put in place, because that could have a negative effect. But I do believe, and I agree a little bit with Andrew, that I think it's important that we have, maybe there's a test of proficiency before you go on a bike, and that gives you a little card that you have to show if you're stopped at any times. I think we should ensure that every single cyclist wears a helmet, that basically they are insured, maybe it's third party, so they're always protecting the other person. And at the same time, I think speed is something that I'm afraid you're never going to stop cyclists, because they're always going to weave in and out. But I think if they have the proficiency and they've gone through some kind of a test before they get on a bike, they will at least know what the rules are and also be more careful.
So, Andrew, I guess Mr. Motivator's main point there against the licence plates is that it might put off those casual cyclists who we want to start cycling so that they get some exercise.
I would have thought it was in the interest of Mr. Motivator to have cyclists who are cycling more safely, because that's in the interest of everybody, Dan. We want cyclists to observe the highway code. We don't want them going up one-way streets the wrong way. We see it all the time. Why are they cycling on the pavement when they've got all these wretched cycle highways everywhere, which is very bad if you're walking. They come up behind you. You could walk into them at any time. What's most important here is the safety of road users, and that's going to be improved dramatically if cyclists have to have a number plate. It's a no-brainer, and I hope the government get on with it quickly, and we're quite right to. Every cyclist should wear a helmet, because why should the NHS have to pay for people who suffer injuries which could possibly be prevented if they're wearing a helmet?
I mean, Dave Sherry,
I don't think we're disagreeing, Andrew. Sorry, I'm saying I don't think we're disagreeing, Andrew. I think we are agreeing. I'm just saying that I don't think that we need to have a number plate on the back of a bike. I'm saying that every single cyclist, before you get on top of that bike, you must do some kind of test.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Dave Sherry, do you accept the fundamental thrust of Andrew Pearce's point, which is that cyclists, especially in big cities, are incredibly arrogant and the vast majority pick and choose when they follow the rules?
Yeah, but there's an old saying, natural selection. If you don't want to follow or adhere to the highway code, you're going to end up possibly seriously injured. The health benefits are a top. And basically, I'll tell you a little story. And it happened about 7 years ago. And I was hit by no fault of my own by an uninsured HGV Arctic lorry. And basically, he left the scene. So that left me with a permanent disability. Now, all manner of vehicles kill. Cyclists do kill, single figures though. But the thing we have to understand is the biggest killer out on the road at the moment are car drivers. The highway code changed to adapt for the vulnerable road users. You had too much of a good time and you whinged then and you are whinging now. And you need to just get with the routine now and understand that cyclists do not emit an emission, so they don't have to pay road tax or its visual emissions. We don't need insurance because we're not considered under the Road Traffic Act as a motorised vehicle. And we're like anyone else, like horse riders, mobility and pedestrians, we're trying to get from A to B.
So, Andrew, you're just whining, according to Dave Sherry. You're just whining. Look, this guy was actually hit by a motor vehicle. He's been permanently disabled, and you are moaning, Andrew Pearce.
I am moaning, and I'm going to carry on moaning, and I'm surprised Dave won't be a bit more realistic. Look, there's been a massive explosion in the number of cyclists in Britain today. In London in the last 20 years, it's thought to have gone up by 80%. When you have that big an increase, you need to start making other rules. And you've got to put rules in place because they are reckless, the majority of cyclists I see on the roads, and they're not just endangering themselves, Dave, they're endangering pedestrians, other cyclists, motorists who try to avoid them, and get in the back of any black cab and get their view on cyclists. I tell you, you wouldn't be able to put them on this programme, Dan, before the 9 o'clock watershed.
Dave?
Right, now I'm going to tell you another little story. I'm a professional bus driver and have been for 20 years in London. So I understand, and I have a higher standard of driving ability than the average car drivers. So at the end of the day, I choose to cycle for the health benefits. Mr. Motivator knows where I'm coming from. I do 22, 20 back. I don't exercise in my little box of a cab, what I'm doing in my bus. So at the end of the day, you've got to understand the health benefits. I know where you're coming from. I sit on the fence, I choose to cycle, and I go for the idiots who I see on the road on a daily basis. I understand the concerns of car drivers, but
why are you so opposed to the licensing then? That's what I don't understand.
Who's going to pay for this? Chaps will say whatever he wants, but on the next reshuffle, he's gone. Who's going to foot the bill? Who's going to foot this bill? The DVLA? They can't handle nothing. You know how long I have to wait for a driving licence?
OK, so you think bureaucracy will slow something like this down, which is possible, but that's not a reason to disagree with it in principle, Mr. Murphy.
If it works, good.
Listen,
Can I ask Dave?
Yes, come in, Andrew.
No, I was just going to say, what's Dave's favourite bird? Is it an ostrich by any chance? Because he's got his head firmly buried in the sand here. You can't pretend there's not a huge problem, and there is a huge problem. So this is a very practical way of dealing with it, and I can't, for the life of me, get why you won't get with it.
Dave?
Right, I will get with it, but let's think about it, OK?
I have.
We're talking single figures with regard to fatalities and that for cyclists and that.
Well, that's
but
too
we're
many.
talking endless amounts for motorised vehicles, yeah? Motorised vehicles are the killers.
Well, I feel like I'm going to be killed every day by cyclists, and I want that fear taken away. Final word to you, Mr. Motivator. Sorry, I interrupted there.
Let's do what we can to encourage all the health benefits that's derived from cycling, such as reduces stress, it improves your memory, your cognitive functions, works all the muscles in your lower body. And then let's get people who sit in their cars to get out their cars and start riding a bike, because that's the future.
Oh, my goodness, I don't want any more of them on the road. Mr. Motivator, Derek Evans, thank you so much. Thank you, too, to the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the cycling rights activist, Dave Sherry. Fascinating stuff. So who do you agree with? Should cyclists obey the speed limit and wear licence plates? Matthew, via Twitter, says, yes, they should follow speed limits and have insurance, but not licence plates. From Kat, this really is quite dumb. Will it include kids and ordinary people who ride their bike to the shops? And what next? Kids' scooters? Just ridiculous. And from Plex, electric scooters are a bigger nuisance, which should require insurance and number plates as well as helmets for those driving them. And your verdict is now in. 76% of you agree that cyclists should obey the speed limit and wear licence plates, while 24% of you say they should continue cycling unregulated. What's the bet that 24% of you are the folk who cycle unregulated every day? Now, coming up, after an 87-year-old is stabbed to death on his mobility scooter, have we given up on law and order in Britain? Former UKIP leader and decorated police officer Henry Bolton will discuss as tonight's Outsider at 9:50. But first is the BBC's apocalyptic coverage and utilisation of Martin Lewis, making the cost of living crisis seem unconquerable. Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover discusses his controversial piece of work on what he sees as the MSM catastrophising. He's live after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Henry Bolton and Rod Liddle still to come, but first, there is no doubt that the coming months are going to be incredibly difficult for Brits. However, after watching the BBC and the rest of the MSM stoke up hysteria during the pandemic, some critical analysis, I think, of their cost of lockdown coverage is not only healthy, but expected and necessary. And one man who's been brave enough to go against that prevailing narrative is Star Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover, who faced fierce criticism last week for daring to reframe the current situation from an apocalyptic emergency to something more hopeful. His controversial piece was inspired in part by BBC Radio 4's Today programme, allowing money-saving expert Martin Lewis, a man who he admires, to begin, quote, freely prophesying Armageddon over the airwaves.
By the time you get to January, over 18 months, some people will see their bills go from £800 to £4,200 on the same use. This is a national crisis on the scale that we saw in the pandemic. We are currently in that position where we are watching the beds in European hospitals and doing nothing about it and allowing people go to sporting events. Rishi Sunak needs to say more detail of what he will do, and Liz Truss needs to say more with what she will do. And if it is just tax cuts and the Green Levy, then we are going to leave millions destitute and in danger this winter.
Now, while he acknowledges that we are in the grip of an extremely serious crisis, Stephen argues in his lambasting of the, quote, ubiquitous and all-power corporation, when the Beeb wants to make our flesh creep, which is often these days, it calls for mutton. We are in a pickle, but so are most other developed countries, and in some cases the pickle is worse. You wouldn't think so if you relied on the BBC, which is so keen to bash the Tories that it often forgets to look south of Dover. Well, I'm delighted to say that Stephen Glover joins me now. Stephen, were you surprised by the fierce criticism of your column last week?
Well, I wasn't particularly aware of it, actually, because one of the great boons of my life is that I don't do social media. So if there was
for it, Stephen, believe me,
I didn't see it.
Better off for it, that is for sure. I mean, it feels like Martin Lewis, and by the way, I've known Martin Lewis for years. I think he's a great guy, and he is someone that should be listened to and respected. But it does feel like the BBC are using him in a particular way.
Yeah, as I said in that quote you pulled out, they call for Martin when they want to make our flesh creep. And there's no doubt that we face, tremendous problems, really serious problems. But and I also admire him. I mean, he's made a small fortune by advising people how to look after their money, which is a great thing to do. But it's not clear to me how that qualifies him to be really the leading pundit now on the BBC and other channels as well in prophesying doom and gloom, and also worryingly civil unrest. He's been going on for months now about how unless the government takes dramatic action, there's going to be civil unrest. How does he know? It seems to me to be a dangerous prophecy to make. It doesn't help anybody. We don't want civil unrest, but I mean, there's no evidence of it yet. I'm not saying it won't happen, but how is he so sure that it might happen if what he wants to be done isn't done, which is basically what he's saying. He's saying, if the government doesn't do what I say it should do, we're going to have civil unrest.
And perhaps the BBC wants this to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what's fascinating with the way the BBC covers this energy crisis overall is that they only come at it from one perspective, a bit like how I felt the BBC covered lockdown. It was always, why aren't you locking down harder? Why aren't you locking down longer? In this case, it's why aren't you spending more money? It is a very socialist approach that they're taking to this problem when they quiz ministers.
Yeah, I mean, the BBC's approach is that the government must spend much more money, and it never seems to occur to them that people, to some degree, I only say to some degree, have the independence to deal with these problems ourselves. You know, we can use electricity less, we can turn the lights off less, we can turn the heating off at night, we can use our appliances less. All these things, they may be marginal, but if you add them together, they will have some effect. And the assumption that it's entirely down to the government to bail this out is wrong and dangerous, I think. It's obviously people in need are going to require help, and they've already got some help, and they're going to need more help from the government. But most of us are going to have to help ourselves as well, and that's something which is often ignored, not just by the BBC, but also by Martin Lewis, I should say.
Indeed, and that does seem to be the issue with the BBC. The groupthink mentality, which is so evident on the Today programme, is never thinking about a more conservative approach to issues. John Redwood has been very critical, for example, about the tone of all of the interviews that he gives, where the approach is very much tax cuts bad, mass public funding and giveaways good. And the fact is, that isn't the job of the BBC, is it? They should be approaching this issue in an impartial manner. And you could already tell, looking at the coverage, that they've decided that Liz Truss's tax cut approach to dealing with this problem is the wrong one.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, they don't like Liz Truss. But I mean, another thing which is irritating is that they talk about, the BBC likes to give the idea that it's so kind of broad-minded, but in fact, it's very insular. And in reporting our problems, it doesn't compare them to the problems of Europe. And our inflation rate is broadly similar to, even though it's gone up. What we heard today, it's gone up a bit, but it's broadly similar to other European countries. A bit worse than some, not so bad as others. And countries like Germany and Italy, which are far more dependent upon Russian gas than we are quite likely to face more severe problems this winter than we do. I hope they don't for their sake, but it's quite likely. But the way the BBC talks about it, you think that somehow it's almost as though this our problems have been, if not generated, at least made worse by our incompetent, idiotic Tory government. Whereas in fact, these are problems which are shared across the Western world. There is a pretty universal cost of living crisis.
Very well put. Top Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover. Thank you so much, Stephen. Coming up, as inflation skyrockets to a 40-year high of 10.1%, and their bills rise by a reported 2,000%. Are small businesses now the forgotten victims of the energy crisis? I'll debate that with my superstar panel in our Media Buzz shortly. But first, it's the tragedy that's shocked the nation and left us feeling hopeless and despondent after an 87-year-old grandfather is stabbed to death in his mobility scooter. Are we just giving up on law and order in Britain? Well, former UKIP leader and decorated police officer Henry Bolton is tonight's outsider. He'll offer up his view on this shocking story straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front page is coming up just after 10. But first, former policeman and ex-UKIP leader Henry Bolton is tonight's outsider. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, popular pensioner Thomas O'Halloran has become the latest tragic victim of Sadiq Khan's lawless London. The 87-year-old grandfather was stabbed to death in broad daylight yesterday while riding on his mobility scooter in Greenford, West London. The Met Police issued this picture here of a man seen running from the scene, armed with a knife. They advised the public not to approach him. This shocking and unprovoked attack on Mr. O'Halloran in London, it's London's sixth murder in just 4 days, and it highlights the disturbing deterioration of law and order, not just in the capital, but across the entire country. According to police statistics, violent crime offences in England and Wales have skyrocketed from just over 601,000 in the year 2012 to 13 to 2.1 million last year. That frightening increase of 1.5 million violent crimes in a decade is a damning indictment of the state of policing in this country. Coppers have become too focused on serving the woke mob as Orwellian-style thought police instead of fighting real crime. Now, Henry, you received an award for outstanding bravery during your 8 years in the Thames Valley Police. Tell me, have we just given up on real law and order in this country?
I think, Dan, we've got a whole bunch of people making decisions about our policing, both in politics and civil service in the Home Office, and in fact in the police itself, who have simply lost touch with reality of what criminality and crime on the streets is about. You don't see police officers out on foot nowadays. You see them patrolling around in cars and so on. And, you know, part of the problem with that is that right at the beginning of their careers, police officers are not really in touch with the public. And it goes all the way up. There's accelerated promotion schemes, which mean that officers are busy doing academic stuff. They're learning stuff in terms of the theory, but actually not spending time on the streets. The police forces, whether it's the Met or the regional, the provincial police forces, the 43 police forces, are all out there worried about their community relations without realising that when criminals and thugs and gangs see these people in uniform, dancing, and with rainbow colours on their cheeks and so on, when they see that, they think these people are a soft touch. And indeed, ever since David Cameron, and Theresa May started to cut back on policing in 2010, closed the regional police training academies, brought training online and into universities and so on, removed a whole lot of custody suites. So we've even got a problem in jail places where police can put prisoners. So there's a limitation. That's one of the reasons you don't see large-scale arrests at demonstrations in London anymore. The police simply don't have anywhere to put their prisoners. So they've cut back on intelligence analysts. So you've got all of these problems. They simply haven't been replaced. There might be another 20,000 police officers being recruited, but the police stations aren't being brought back in line, and the training colleges and so on aren't being brought back in place. So ultimately, what we've got, as you quite rightly said, we've got a woke, politically correct police force that is too worried about how it looks to the law-abiding public, rather than dealing with the actual criminality on the streets. This particular horrific crime that you've already referred to relates to knife crime again. And what we have, because of our politically correct woke culture that we've got in our police and in our politicians, we have failed totally to recognise that there's a certain propensity towards certain types of crime in different communities. It might be an Anglo-Saxon community, it might be a West Indian community, it might be a Pakistani community, an Asian community, but there are different characteristics in terms of their criminal behaviour, including the English lads, okay? And we have failed utterly to engage with the communities in the right way on that, because we're worried of offending identity politics. We've got to wake up, or the situation's going to get worse. That's my view, Dan.
Yeah, no, and I understand a lot of that. I also just want to touch on, Henry, this effective decriminalisation of theft. We saw a senior police officer at the end of last week come out and say this is doing huge damage in the community. I've been a victim of mugging 3 times in the past 3 years in lawless London. Now, I'm a big guy. I wasn't violently attacked, but I did have my phone stolen from me on all 3 occasions. You just know the police aren't going to do a thing. You know if your house is burgled now, the police are not going to do a thing. And the problem is you look at this murder of Mr. Halloran yesterday, which is just one of those crimes which has shocked the nation. And it's possible, isn't it, Henry? I know we don't know the circumstances yet, but it's possible because he was a busker and he was collecting money for the people of Ukraine to donate for charity. It's possible, at the very least, that this is a theft gone wrong. And the problem is these criminals are now so convinced that they're not going to be done for theft.
Absolutely. Look, when I was a police officer, it was some years ago, admittedly, but if there were prolific burglars, or if there was a prolific or a spate of even shoplifting, we would deal with it because we knew, despite the fact that it was hassle, if you like, low-level crime, paperwork involvement, time and so on, but we would still deal with it because we knew that it would lead to bigger things, and at some point there would be a confrontation and somebody would get hurt. We knew that. But recently, over recent years, burglaries aren't being investigated. It's a you report the crime, and people are led to believe that those reports go into a system, they're analysed, and there's intelligence-led policing to take proactive action. That's not correct. We don't have the analysts in place to crunch the numbers anymore. So the whole system has fallen apart, Dan. You're quite right. And this low-level crime, if left unaddressed, inevitably leads to a higher level of criminality. And that, in turn, raises the stakes for the individuals concerned, the criminals, and therefore it makes the likelihood of violence a lot higher.
No, indeed. Henry Bolton, former UKIP leader, former police officer, thank you so much. Really fascinating analysis there. Of course, my heart goes out to the family of Thomas Halloran, but I just want to show everyone now this very important photo of the man who is a suspect in this case. It is absolutely critical that this bloke is found. He is described by the police as highly dangerous. If you know him, if you've seen him, please report him to the Met Police as soon as possible. Thank you, Henry Bolton. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as inflation surges to a 40-year high of 10.1%, are small businesses, which are reportedly battling a 2,000% rise in bills, being ignored as victims of the cost of lockdown crisis? Under pressure publican and activist Adam Brooks gives his view in the Media Buzz next, alongside his fellow superstar panellists, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel and Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson. Is it any wonder that this...
The Scotland we seek is open, welcoming, diverse and inclusive, and no Tory is ever going to be allowed to change that.
So is it any wonder that rhetoric from Nicola Sturgeon led to this last night?
There will be difficulties and challenges for us along the way, but Scotland will deal with them as all nations do.
After those hate-filled Scottish separatists marred yesterday's hustings in Perth, has Nicola Sturgeon created a dangerous anti-Tory climate north of the border? We'll debate that at 10:30. Can Stonewall save itself from toxic trans extremism? The man who helped establish the organisation, former chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality, Paul Barnes, delivers some important home truths at 10:20. As Sajid Dravid brands the RAF's alleged rejection of white men complete nonsense, should this scandal spell the end of diversity quotas? Well, columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddell drops some truth bombs and uncancelled at 10:40. Plus, apparently this woke Wally at BBC Scotland has telepathic powers.
To see him a couple of years ago in Constantine, one thing that I found actually quite troubling that night was I sensed that quite a lot of people in the audience were there so they could laugh at a bit of racism.
Were they there for that reason? Stay tuned for friend of the show, Constantine Kissen's amazing response to that outrageous claim by the BBC. That's in the Media Buzz soon. And after an 87-year-old grandfather is stabbed to death on his mobility scooter, we'll see how tomorrow's newspapers are reacting to the shocking incident and the growing lawlessness across the country. That's as we look at Thursday's front pages throughout the next hour. I'll also crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the night is out. But before we get stuck into all of that, time for your 10 o'clock news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. A manhunt is underway in Manchester after a 7-year-old girl was abducted this afternoon. Greater Manchester Police have issued 2 images of a man they urgently want to speak to about the incident, and they're asking anyone who sees him to call 999. Detectives say the child was taken into a wooded area in Droylsden. She was safely reunited with her family a short time later. The search continues for a knife-wielding suspect seen fleeing the scene of a fatal attack on an 87-year-old man in West London. Thomas O'Halloran was stabbed to death while riding his mobility scooter in Greenford. Police described the attack as shocking and unprovoked. An image released of the suspect shows him wearing a dark T-shirt, white baseball cap and builder's gloves. Families struggling with the rising cost of living now face a rate of inflation climbing at its fastest pace in 40 years. The Consumer Price Index reached double figures, 10.1% in July. That's up from 9.4% the month before. The rising cost of food is believed to be having the biggest effect. Prime Ministerial hopefuls Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss both claim they have the right formula to sort out the economy.
As I've consistently said, inflation is the greatest challenge facing the new Prime Minister. Now, I have the right plan to get a grip of inflation, to support the people who most need our help with the cost of living, and to grow our economy so that we never have to deal with this again.
We've had 2 decades of low growth in this country. I will not continue with business as usual. I will be bold in making the change we need to help people right across our country.
A director at energy regulator Ofgem has quit over concerns that it's failing to protect struggling households during the global energy crisis. Christine Farnish says she resigned because she couldn't support a decision to recover supplier costs by raising customer prices. In an article in The Times, she claimed that consumers now face having several £100s added to their bills. In response, an Ofgem spokesman said the situation has forced them to make incredibly difficult decisions. Pollution warnings are in place for England and Wales as heavy rain floods sewerage systems following months of drought. More than 40 beaches and swimming pools are affected, with swimmers advised against bathing due to water being polluted by recent downpours. Parts of the UK have seen torrential rain after weeks of intense heat waves. It follows an amber warning from the Met Office for fast-running floodwater in south-east England, meaning danger to life. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan.
Tomorrow's news tonight now on Our Media Buzz. First front pages are interestingly actually all leading with different stories so far tomorrow. And the Daily Star kicks off with my lead tonight. Very different take, though. They're criticising Liz Truss for the leaked audio in which she was heard saying that Brits need more graft. The paper brands her a hypocrite because she's entitled to 13 weeks holiday as an MP. Now brace for the interest rate hike is the instruction from tomorrow's newspaper. The former Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has told the that the government is, quote, not functional and must get tough on wages to tackle rising inflation. I mean, let's be honest, though, the reason they're not functional at the moment is because Tory MPs decided to depose the Prime Minister at a time of crisis, which I was warning of 4 months before they did so. The Metro leads on the tragic and shocking murder of pensioner Thomas O'Halloran as police hunt a bloodied man seen fleeing from the scene. And of course, we showed you his picture at the end of last hour. My superstar panel back with me now. The Daily Mail top columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and the political editor for the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Now, the economic woes Britain shares with the rest of the world got gloomier today, as we just saw in the eye there, after the Bank of England revealed a dismal inflation rate of 10.1%. It's the first time in 4 decades that inflation has hit double digits in this country, and combined with a spiralling energy crisis, there are certainly choppy waters ahead. But while all government intervention has been focused on helping domestic households, little thought so far has been spared for our nation's on the brink businesses. Pubs, restaurants, retailers, construction, hospitality firms and more have only just dragged themselves off the canvas after 2 years of insane COVID policies. Now, though, they're claiming to be dealing with energy price rises of up to 2,000%, with many facing closure for good. Wholesale gas prices on the continent are soaring to record highs almost weekly, and Putin could turn off the taps completely this winter after already cutting supplies of one major pipeline to just 20% capacity. So Adam Brooks, you're of course not only our superstar panellist, but a successful and respected publican yourself. So you won't be getting the kind of state handouts domestic customers receive. Instead, you're also dealing with higher VAT, higher business rates, a whole load of overheads. So how serious is this situation for other entrepreneurs and small businesses?
This is worse than COVID, and I can't stress it. I've been shouting this for a year, Dan, into the abyss, and even the last few months, everything, and rightfully has been about households and people that are struggling, and I get that. But
there's no energy cap for you.
There's no energy cap for businesses. So, even when I see people saying, oh, my home energy's doubled, my pub's energy bills doubled last November. So I've had a year of this, and now coming to this November, the same pub, it's going to double again. So I'm going to be paying 4 times what I was paying only sort of 18 months ago.
Which is something like £15,000 a month.
No, that's my other pub that will go where I'm out of contract. But this pub that was paying £1,500 a month is now going to be paying £6,000 a month come November. And it's a small backstreet pub. Now, you add up my utilities, it's more than my rent. Now, I should weather this. You know, I've had some successful years and, you know, savings and whatever. But how is the average publican, the average cafe owner, you know, the retailer, how are they going to survive? I'm hearing stories of, you know, some shops, £10,000 a month. That's over £100,000 a year electric.
So what is the solution? I know you're highly critical of Rishi Sunak's increase of
a lot of this is very needless. I mean, we can't change the underlying price of gas. The market forces these, you know, we can't go against that. But coming out of COVID restrictions in March, many hospitality big names, you know, far bigger than me, Kate Nichols, Sacha Lord, you know, a lot of the big trade bodies were saying, do not put VAT back up to 20%. You know, we was on an emergency rate of 12.5%. Rishi Sunak ignored that. And, I mean, Ireland kept theirs at 9% and it's still there. Now...
For good reason.
Right, so that forced prices up a lot, over 10% for hospitality. Prices had to go up. That contributed to inflation, 1.4% of the CPI, UK CPI, just from that alone. Now, you know, prices are going to have to go up again. But if they help us out and they cut VAT, an emergency VAT cut, many businesses won't put their prices up. Many businesses that can will reduce their prices. The consumer will be better off. You know.
So you think emergency VAT cut, rate reductions, and an energy cap for business?
Well, and how can a business be paying 6 times, 5, 6, 7, even 10 times what they was paying 18 months ago, and a household is capped at double? You know, how is that fair?
Nigel Nelson, you don't agree with Adam's prescription for this?
No, I do actually. I mean, I like that Adam's come up with ideas that certainly neither the government nor the opposition nor our two contenders for Prime Minister.
But you say the priority should remain with families.
I think the priority has to remain with families. There is one big problem, I think, about businesses, and that is how you actually target them. The one thing about the furlough scheme, which it showed, was how much money was lost. So while the furlough scheme was overall really successful, 5.5 billion, which is the equivalent of 1p off basic rate income tax, that was lost in fraud and error. So the point here really, Adam, is that I'd like to see the businesses in real trouble targeted. The question about that is how you decide that. You can't open everyone's books and have a look at them.
I get that.
So it's just a question of actually how you make sure the money goes to the people who really need it.
So the only thing is about just targeting households is that that's fine. Some of the households won't need that £400 or let's say it's £1,000 that end up. Some of them won't need it, right? So and they're going to get that, and that's like a bonus.
Wrong. And Amanda, that was one of the issues with COVID, wasn't it? And the whole Sunak approach during COVID. Lots of businesses were given money that they didn't actually need, while other individuals fell through the net altogether.
There are two things that make me other individuals say, well, I think, Adam, you'll know these figures better than me, but I think 390,000 small businesses went to the wall during the first year of COVID. That's like 1 in 12, something like that. And who knows what happened in the second year? We don't have the figures there. I'm not crying. I've just got something in my eye.
It is very sad. And the other issue is
Amanda,
though...
the other thing that really drives me nuts is I think that history will look upon this period as an illegal imprisonment of the British people that virtually destroyed our economy for a generation. Because when you look back, they did not have to lock us in our houses
Which,
for 2
Adam,
years,
we
basically.
were warning. And look, the problem is, with all of this, what good is there saying, told you so, right?
No,
what
I don't
good
get
is
any
there
satisfaction from that at all.
And I get no satisfaction from it, but my frustration is that this was all so obvious. You didn't have to be a top economist. No. You didn't have to be a fortune teller. This was always the consequence.
And you needed to speak to people on the ground. I'm not saying come and talk to me. I'm talking to your average, publican, your average cafe owner. Like that. If MPs actually bothered talking to us rather than advisors that were getting, their spreadsheets wrong and whatever, we wouldn't be in this mess. And, if I'm a publican in 12 months' time, I'll be amazed. I'll be amazed because I can see over 50%, maybe 60, 70% of pubs closing within a year.
And you were
They're
very
unviable.
successful.
Yeah,
and so this could be the end of
some of us are being punished by what date our energy contracts expire or we locked in for. It's not a good operator's fault. You know, it's the luck of the draw. When does that end? You know, some people are locked into 2024. Fantastic, they're going to be all right. Some of us are not. You know, a lot of people are probably going to expire in the winter or early next year. And then, you know, where are they going to find that £6,000 a month plus?
I know, and these are small businesses, Amanda. They were already facing the headwinds of the move to online, the dominance of the likes of Amazon. So
they've been so
hammered. A total convergence of nightmares.
And they've been completely hammered over the last couple of years. And, you know, we're not just losing, you know, the odd small business here or there. We're losing part of the culture of Britain. You know, the high street, you know, shops that I know near me that have been there for 50 years, who can't compete with the few big chains that can do it. You know, I did offer to, I was Adam earlier, that to help out, that I would be prepared to go and even to serve,
Peggy Mitchell style?
to serve or even sing at his pub.
I don't want to scare my customers.
He suggested to drive up business. I go to the rival pub, call
really,
him a friend.
But, you know, Dan,
that was
I'm like, sorry, I'm like many other businessmen. I took 2 bounce-back loans during that time. They were meant to be to bounce back. They become survival loans.
Yeah.
You know, every day that
Are you having to pay them back yet?
Yeah, I'm paying £800 a month per pub, per bounce-back loan. Now, at the end of the day, no one forced me to take that. That money was on offer, and we felt we needed that to survive, which we did. But, you know, so many businesses did that, and so many are probably struggling to pay that back now. Yeah. I mean, you know, we need a VAT cut quick. We need things that are going to happen now. You know, stop the rates, stop the business rates for a while. You know, take the VAT off of energy bills, the green levies. Give us an emergency VAT rate. Do something now, because corporation tax decreases only help those with profits, well, look, and that's down the line.
It is only a couple of weeks until Liz Truss is at number 10, and I think she's the best bet for your business at this point.
I agree.
Now, more shocking clips have emerged online over the weekend of China's zero-COVID hell, showing shoppers at an IKEA store in Shanghai scrambling to escape an immediate lockdown of the shop because of a possible infection. These poor, terrified shoppers would have been subjected to 2 days of sinister COVID quarantine, followed by another hellish 5 days in a so-called health observation camp. Unfortunately, running from the shop wouldn't have made much difference in China's Orwellian facial recognition society. The Communist Party would have caught up with them regardless. I have to say, my heart goes out to the Chinese citizens stuck in that hell, and it highlights why we must never allow our leaders to impose these destructive lockdown policies in the West ever again. Nigel Nelson, Adam Brooks, Amanda Patel, do stand by, because coming up, after hate-filled Scottish separatists marred yesterday's hustings in Perth, has Nicola Sturgeon created a dangerous anti-Tory climate? We debate that at 10:30 and bring you more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. That's in the Media Buzz. But first, as Sajid Javid brands the RAF's alleged rejection of white men complete nonsense, should this shock report spell the end of diversity quotas? Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle drops some truth bombs in Uncancelled next.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Welcome back. In a dangerous example of virtue signalling, it was alleged yesterday that the RAF has effectively paused extending job offers to white males in order to meet, quote, impossible diversity targets, while the force has disputed the claims, weakly arguing they were always going to seek to recruit the best talent available while simultaneously approving diversity. The force's head of recruitment, a senior female officer they have refused to name, has resigned over the matter. And former Health Secretary Sajid Javid has hit out at the policy approach this morning.
Based on what you've just said, it sounds like complete nonsense to me. I don't think any organisation, whether it's the RAF or any other public or private organisation, should be recruiting on the basis of one's race. Of course, we want to see a diverse workforce. We want to see all talents come through. And I happen to think having more diversity actually increases the productivity of your workforce, but it should not be based on race, whether it's black, white or anything else.
So, should this shocking report spell the end of diversity quotas altogether? Well, I'm joined now by the associate editor of The Spectator and columnist extraordinaire, Rod Liddle, for his take. Rod, is this a racist policy?
Yes, of course it's racist. You can call it positive discrimination if you like, but it's still racist. What bothers me about it is Sajid Javid, wasn't it? You just had a clip of there. I didn't recognise him for a minute. It was a beard, I think.
He's grown one.
He is part and has been part of the government which has overseen these diversity quotas across all state institutions, including the armed forces. How this idiot can sit there and say that it sounds like nonsense to him and it shouldn't happen. This Conservative government, which we have now, is a government which has brought all this stuff in. You know, they are responsible. And the government could say right now, we are having no more diversity quotas in our armed forces because we do not wish to be in a position whereby a Russian MiG flies over the highlands of Scotland and the RAF is unable to find a transgendered one-legged Pakistani dwarf to fight that particular incursion, which is the kind of system which they're looking to do at the moment. Because you can't have it both ways, and you can't have it, as Sajid says, that, yes, of course, we all believe diversity is a good thing, but you cannot simultaneously say that diversity must be a priority for the RAF and that must be something which they make their most important goal and expect them to hire the best available people, because the best available people will not be a perfect representation of the demographic makeup of our country. It's an absurdity.
Of course, Rod. And also, what message does this send to the members of the RAF who, let's be honest, we need to be lean, mean fighting machines who are competing against each other, not thinking that certain people are getting jobs simply because of the colour of their skin, because it's irrelevant. In war, it is utterly irrelevant.
Well, this is a terrible thing as well, because it's also, it's racist against white people, sure, but it's also racist against black and Asian people.
Yeah.
And it's condescending and patronising. Yeah. And I would be terribly hurt if I was a black pilot in the RAF, or a female pilot from an Indian heritage, I would be appalled to think that people might consider that I've got that job as a consequence of either the colour of my skin or my gender. You know, when actually they got their job because they're brilliant at what they do. You know, it hurts. It hurts everybody, this. But most crucially, you know, I guess, it hurts our defence. We shouldn't have a defence which is run like this. It should not happen. But it is still, Dan, you know, I can't help saying it. And we say this every time one of these ludicrous culture war issues springs to the fore. This is a Conservative government, Dan.
I know. What are they doing? And it's all well and good Rishi Sunak saying, oh, this is terrible, this is dangerous. It's like, what did you do when you were the second most important person in government? I mean, Rod, I think the person we need to give full credit to here is the head of RAF recruitment. I mean, by the way, a female officer, not that it should make a difference, but it's interesting, isn't it, that she was a woman. And she blew the whistle on this. If she hadn't have resigned, we would have no idea that this was even going on. And she has given up her career. I mean, personally, I think they need to get her back, drop this rule ASAP, because she sounds like a very good woman to me. But thank God she blew the whistle on this.
Thank God she did. She should be in charge of the RAF. As far as I'm concerned. No, I mean, but this is often the case, that very often the people who are prepared to blow the whistle on this kind of stuff are from what we call, wrongly, of course, minorities, because women aren't a minority. But it would be either a woman or a black guy or an Asian woman or whatever, because they can see and are less scared about speaking out than perhaps a white bloke would be. But all credit to the woman. It was an incredibly selfless and very brave thing to do. But I'm sure that in government departments, in the civil service, in all the departments, in everything which the government has a handle on, and which has swallowed whole, it would seem, Stonewall's various propaganda methods for diversity, there will be people in there who are aghast at what we are doing and who wish that they had the guts to resign as well. And I don't blame them for not doing so. We've all got to earn a crust. You know?
No, indeed. And that's why the government has to actually stick by the rhetoric and a lot of the rhetoric that we've heard throughout this leadership campaign and actually formally cut the cord with Stonewall, who we're going to be talking about later in the show, by the way, Rod, because there's a huge issue with Stonewall. But there's also a huge issue with the fact that Stonewall has infiltrated so many of these government departments.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, for a long time, one particular wing of the Conservative Party, of which Penny Mordaunt is the obvious example, was allowed to dictate all this stuff. You know, this was the Nicky Morgans, the Justine Greenings, the Penny Mordaunts. They all go along with this utterly bizarre rubbish. And I suspect that there are quite a few Conservative MPs like Sajid who do go along with it, but they've never said anything. They never say anything. They never do anything about it. And it's still happening today. You know, and it's the same with the NHS crisis and the NHS insisting that it would continue, despite what the government said, to abide by its own transgender guidelines and allow transgendered men onto female wards. You know, it was still prepared to do that. No one's clamped down on them, and I don't think they will.
Well, look, I have to have some hope. I have to have some hope, Rod. I have to hope that a Truss administration, perhaps with Braverman as Home Secretary, who has been very good on this stuff as Attorney General. But look, the proof is going to be in the pudding because it can't go on like this. Rod Little, thank you so much, Rod. But coming up, can Stonewall, as Rod just mentioned, rehabilitate itself after falling under the spell of toxic trans extremism? Will former chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality, Paul Barnes, is uncancelled and delivering home truths to the organisation he helped to establish at 10:40. But next, after hate-filled Scottish separatists marred yesterday's hustings in Perth, has Nicola Sturgeon created a dangerous anti-Tory climate? My panel. Debate that, and after an 87-year-old grandfather is stabbed to death in his mobility scooter, we'll see how tomorrow's newspapers are reacting to this shocking lawlessness across the country. That's all in the Media Buzz, straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Okay, more of tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages just in now. Let's get straight to them. The Guardian leads with the cost of living crisis trapping 45 million people in fuel poverty. The paper reports 2/3 of UK households will be affected by the fuel shortages as inflation hits a 40-year high. The Daily Telegraph leads with Britain having the worst inflation in the G7 after the recent rise in consumer prices. What kind of monster kills an 87-year-old on a scooter? The Daily Mail asks. They emphatically lead with the story of the grandfather, Thomas O'Halloran, who was tragically stabbed to death on that mobility scooter in lawless London. Police are hunting a man captured on CCTV holding a knife and covered in blood. The Sun reveals crisis club Manchester United is being targeted for a dramatic takeover by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, one of Britain's richest men. It follows a disastrous start to the season for United and their new manager after they lost both of their opening games. The Daily Express leads with homeowners potentially facing another shock interest rate increase in an effort to curb inflation. Economists predict a second 0.5% in a row next month. On the front page of the Times, Generation COVID faces university rejection. That's as tens of thousands of teenagers are expected to miss out on their first choices in their A-level results tomorrow. That poor generation, honestly, what they've had to go through these past couple of years, it's appalling. More on the Media Buzz now, though, with tonight's superstar panel, the Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and political editor for the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Now, as you might remember, I saw firsthand in Eastbourne a few weeks ago how left-wing extremists tried turning the Tory party leadership hustings into a hotbed of foul-mouthed hate. But this next display of Scottish separatist aggression from the Perth hustings last night was even worse, and it will gain little sympathy for the separatist cause. According to reports, Tory members and even pensioners were pelted with eggs and branded scum by low-life protesters who appeared to be gagging to cause trouble outside. Watch.
There will be difficulties and challenges for us along the way, but Scotland will deal with them as all nations do.
They're called the intolerant left for a reason. Now, MPs were quick to condemn the ugly behaviour. Andrew Stevenson, the MP for Pendle, said witnessing Tory scum being screamed at elderly Scottish pensioners and young women simply for attending a hustings. Also reports of spitting. Nicola Sturgeon, will you unequivocally condemn this vile behaviour from your independent supporters? And Andrew Bowie, the MP for West Avonshire and Kincardine, added eggs being thrown, spitting at pensioners, the good old Tory scum banner out. Good to see Nicola Sturgeon's civic and joyous nationalism in action in Perth tonight. Now, it took scheming Sturgeon until 1 p.m. this afternoon to finally condemn the behaviour of her ilk, but she was also quick to add an anti-Tory barb of her own in the apology.
I will condemn any abusive behaviour. I'm not responsible for it. I wasn't in Perth last night. It wasn't being done in my name. As far as I'm aware, it wasn't SNP members doing that. Neither of these Tory candidates had anything to say to Scotland that was relevant to the issues that are important right now. Both of them seemed more intent on denying Scotland's right to democracy.
But is it any wonder separatist thugs feel inspired to behave like that when Sturgeon herself has consistently spewed the toxic and divisive rhetoric she claims to disapprove of?
The Scotland we seek is open, welcoming, diverse and inclusive, and no Tory is ever going to be allowed to change that.
Amanda Platel.
Don't get me started on that overstuffed little haggis. Crikey. She does everything she possibly can to incite hatred of England especially. Well, the first thing I'd like to see is give back the Barnard formula, more than £1,000 per Scot that we pay them. She's just outrageous. What upsets me most, and it did actually really upset me seeing those scenes of pensioners being spat at, because I've been spat at lots of times by Labour, not in Scotland, but certainly at conferences in Manchester, Birmingham, so much so we had to get cops in, not just to protect me, to protect any person that was walking past. But I've never understood how, you know, I'm a passionate... What's going on tonight? Was that you again?
No, not me.
I'm a passionate Conservative, and I really respect Labour's views. I've got lots of Labour friends, but a lot of Labour people have a pathological hatred for us, and it's really visceral, and I don't understand it. We all want the same thing. We all want the best possible world for the most people. We just think you get there different ways.
And Nigel, the SNP separatists have a nasty streak running through them, don't they?
Yeah, but let's just have a look at that footage. Well, that footage that we keep getting back again. I saw an awful lot of socialist worker banners there. And as Amanda and I know from being at Conservative Party conferences, that we call them the usual suspects. They're usually the ones who cause the most trouble. They're Trotskyite revolutionaries, real sort of far lefters. I mean, bear in mind, the SNP MPs came out and condemned what happened. They said that if those people were SNP members, they ought to be thrown out of the party. So
Are they going to hunt them down? Because believe me, from the footage that I saw, it was very clear, because remember, some of them were also attacking the BBC Scottish reporter. It was very clear that some of these folk were members of the SNP. Not all of them. Some of them were members of...
I'm not sure that was clear that they were there.
It's easy to know who they are.
Exactly.
They've all got, we're all registered to the parties.
Yeah.
You know who they were. And, you know, it's the only time ever walking down the street that I've been called that see you next Tuesday word. It's been by Labour supporters. You know, when I'm just going about my own business.
Are you sure the Labour are not far left? You know, like the socialist workers and so on?
Well, they don't usually wear T-shirts, Nigel.
Yeah, but can we just remember, John MacDonald, who's the Chancellor, talked about hounding... Shadow Chancellor. Was talking about hounding Tories in the street, talking about lynching. We had Angela Rayner with her scum remark, Tory scum remark.
Which she apologised for after.
Yes, yeah, but
and quite rightly
what I'm trying to say is, you know...
You should not have made that remark.
Sure of this.
It's aggressive rhetoric from these people
culture
that doesn't help. You know, it's the tolerant left.
But none of us would support that here.
No.
But the fact is that scene in Scotland last night should have been immediately condemned by the SNP, immediately condemned by Nicola Sturgeon. She should have told her supporters to go home and let democracy play out. And it's not a surprise, is it, with the rhetoric that she constantly spews about, as Amanda says, the English, and particularly the Tory English. Now, we all know the BBC is Britain bashing and biased, but did you also know it's full of mind readers? Now, this is BBC Scotland presenter Martin Geisler, who made the bizarre claim as he discussed the decision to cancel controversial comedian Jerry Sadowitz's Edinburgh Fringe show over so-called extreme jokes. He declared live on air that he could tell what the audience members at a previous Sadowitz show were feeling. He says they had racist intent. But he didn't see trigonometry host and friend of this show, Constantine Kissin, coming. Watch. Oh, no. OK, we're going to come back to me. We're going to try that again. It's one of those nights, isn't it, guys? It's one of those nights. Do we have that brilliant clip? We'll try once more.
Speaking from a personal experience, as I said, I went to see him a couple of years ago in Constantine. One thing that I found actually quite troubling that night was I sensed that quite a lot of people in the audience were there so they could laugh at a bit of racism because they don't get the chance all that often. Does that trouble you?
If I were a mind reader like you, it would trouble me. I have no idea why the people were enjoying his show. I have more faith in human beings than perhaps you do. You're able to understand irony and very clever comedy that Jerry Sadowitz does.
Well, as you correctly point out, I was there, you weren't. I was watching what was going on around me and trying to assess who thought what about it. But listen, it was fascinating to hear.
How did you assess that? Sorry.
Well, just by judging, by watching people watching their body language and listening to them around the venue.
You can tell what someone thinks.
No,
I'm
not. I'm not saying I knew what they were thinking. I'm just saying it struck me that might have been the case.
No, you did say you knew what they were thinking.
No,
you said exactly that. You said that you knew that
I said I was concerned they might have been. But listen, we are out of time.
Yes, Constantine. He wrapped that up so quickly. Believe me, they weren't out of time. They were not out of time. The spineless Beeb tried to brush that awkward exchange under the rug by posting the interview online without that scuffle. But as always, we have the receipts here on this show. My brilliant colleague, Colin Brazier, summed this all up best when he tweeted, "The BBC is to be congratulated for employing presenters who can tell what someone is thinking just by looking at them. Enjoy the warm glow of knowing that the £159 you give to the BBC every year on pain of prosecution is well spent." Nigel Nelson, Adam Brooks, Amanda Patel, do stand by because coming up, our queen of the tennis court and a pair of runaway royals are in the running for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass Don't Miss the Coronation at 10:50. But next, has Stonewall lost its way by embracing toxic trans extremism? Former chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality, Paul Barnes, he's going to deliver some home truths to the organisation he helped establish in Uncancelled right after this preview of tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, will leadership frontrunner Liz Truss be able to deliver opportunity equality across the UK? Levelling Up Minister Paul Scully explains why he's backing Truss for PM. As the majority of Brits say enough to the censorship of classic movies and TV shows, Hello Hello's Vicky Michelle leads the resistance against wokery and celebrates the iconic sitcom's 40th anniversary. Plus, there's big opinion from political commentator Richard Taylor, Anne Widdecombe, and my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, my next guest has been an integral supporter of gay, lesbian and trans rights in this country since the early 1990s. Paul Barnes was the chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality, and with his expertise, he helped advise Stonewall in its early days to dramatically improve the lives of LGBT people in Britain at a time when they suffered grave inequality compared to world-beating freedoms and civil liberties they enjoy here today. However, he now shares serious concerns about how the group has gone from being a trusted force for good to a self-destructing organisation overtaken by extremists who want to force folk to say that trans women are the same as biological women, while urging nurseries to open discussions with 2-year-olds about gender identity. Well, tonight I can exclusively reveal that Paul, a trusted advisor during Stonewall's early years, has written a bombshell letter to the group's board of directors urging them to rethink their toxic strategy before it's too late. Sent just an hour ago, Paul writes in the letter, "Your slogan, 'Some people are gay, get over it,' perfectly summed up the success we had in winning over public opinion. But when Stonewall adopted trans rights into your remit, the core principle that you chose to fight on made tackling any hostility towards trans rights more difficult. The key difference is that while previously we campaigned to change opinion, in this case, your strategy is based on trying to change facts." He goes on, "Over the past few years, Stonewall has seen its reputation damaged, its influence as a political campaigning group severely compromised, its leadership questioned by many LGBT people, its standing in the wider community undermined, its previously welcomed social equality programs poisoned, and I'm assuming its financial well-being under threat. In the eyes of policymakers, much of the media and the wider public, Stonewall has transitioned from an angel to the devil." And I'm delighted to be joined by Paul now. Paul, this is a very powerful letter from a major supporter of Stonewall historically. Do you think they're going to listen to you?
Well, I hope so, but I doubt it. That's up to them, Dan. The point is, as I said in my letter, Stonewall, over many decades, has done a brilliant job making the lives of millions of gay people far, far better. But we did it by winning the argument, by having the debate, by winning the argument and winning people round to the fact that, gay people in the 1980s with the AIDS crisis and Section 28, we were seen as groups of people either to be pitied or hated or feared. That's where Stonewall started from. And we turned public opinion round so that actually, if you think about it, businesses, political parties, individuals, the way in which they treat gay people has been seen as a way of showing what type of person they are. If they treat you well, then they're good people. The Tory party picked up on that. David Cameron, introduced gay marriage. It's fantastic stuff. But exactly the opposite is happening now because of the strategy that they've chosen on trans. I'm a great believer in trans rights, but when I actually look now, you look at a YouGov poll that came out just last month. They do it every year about people's attitudes to trans equality and trans rights. Since 2018, when Stonewall kicked off with trans women are women, at that time, more people supported that than opposed it. 4 years after Stonewall's campaign, it's changed. Now more people oppose that than support it. So Stonewall's actually pushing things backwards. And it's doing it because it's not having the debate. It's shutting people down. It's getting the changes it is getting through changing working practices and such like, because it's building on a huge amount of trust and respect and confidence that Stonewall had built up over many years, because if Stonewall told you something, you believed it. But now that's been exposed and people aren't believing it anymore. And where, gay rights was once the flagship, trans issues are too toxic to touch. We've gone, that's why I said, from being the angel to being the devil. And when you get both the leaders, both the candidates for the leadership saying that they will distance themselves even further from Stonewall, when you get the Labour leader saying that, could we please have some calm? Can we calm down a bit? Can we deal with this in a much more respectable way? And he wouldn't even sign the trans pledge card. When the Labour shadow equality minister refused to turn up to the Stonewall fringe meeting at Labour Party conference, how can they be an effective lobbying group now if the major parties feel they're too toxic to touch? And the reason that's bad is because we need them. LGBT people need leadership and need to have their views represented. But that's just not happening now.
No, indeed. And the rhetoric all has to change, doesn't it? Because the irony of this situation is that someone like you, who has been a campaigner for gay rights, for trans rights for so many years, taking the position that you're taking now, Paul, can see you branded by the trans extremists, as I call them, and many of them operate in Stonewall, as transphobic, which is just so damaging because it's so blatantly untrue.
But it's even worse than that, Matt, Dan, because what's actually happened is that because the Stonewall say trans women are women, that is a fact, the vast majority of people don't actually believe that. They're not transphobic, they just don't believe that. They're not against trans people, they just don't believe that. But Stonewall has now set up a position that if you dare say, I support trans people, but I just don't believe that, you are transphobic. So actually, at a time when Stonewall used to do so well by being inclusive and getting people to want to be, to support gay people to be part of society. What they're now doing by saying, if you don't support us on this, you are transphobic, they're effectively making enemies all over the place where enemies didn't exist.
Yeah, and it's driven the community apart, hasn't it? It's completely divided the LGBT community.
It has. You wouldn't know it if you listen to Stonewall, who will tell you, that we're all united behind this. And actually, if you don't believe us, you're not our type of gay, sort of thing. But if you just read the gay media online, and whenever there's a trans story, just read what the gay LGBT people write under it. As many say we don't support this as say we do. Stonewall does not speak for the full LGBT community now, and they won't let others speak on their behalf. So, we are desperately need leadership to rescue us from the position we've got into.
Thank you for taking the lead on this. It is an incredibly powerful letter. I really hope the directors of Stonewall are listening. I'm not holding out much hope, though. Paul Barnes, former chair of the Tory campaign for homosexual equality and an early Stonewall advisor, thank you so much. We went to Stonewall following their receipt of Paul's letter, but they were unable to comment. It's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. The superstar panel are back. Amanda Patel, let's kick off with you. And who is your nominee for greatest Britain this Wednesday night?
It's got to be Emma. I can never pronounce her name.
Raducanu.
Emma.
No, you still didn't get it right. Try once more.
Raducanu.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, Emma Raducanu, who finally won her second match after being paid millions and millions by Tiffany's and all sorts of companies. And well done her, brilliant. But even better that she beat that horrible whinging Serena Williams, who is, of course, besties with Meghan Markle.
And is also not retiring from tennis, Amanda. No, we don't say that now. She's evolving away.
Oh, yeah. Can't afford the babysitters.
It's like the conscious uncoupling now. No one retires, you just evolve away from your job.
I wish she'd dissolve away.
My greatest Britain is a few people tonight. It's the British Pub and Beer Association. It is UK Hospitality, the Nighttime Industries Association, Kate Nichols, the BIIAB, Sacha Lord and other trade bodies for writing a very strong letter to MPs warning of what's coming with hospitality and small businesses.
Great stuff. Nigel Nelson, your nominee?
Yeah, mine's just one, and it's the Tory MP, William Ragg, who has been open and honest about taking time off because he's suffering from anxiety and depression. He could have so easily just made an excuse.
No, I read that tweet, thought it was incredibly brave. Should we have a little look at that? Yeah, there it is. No, very brave stuff. Do you know what, though? I'm going to go with Emma Raducanu. Because what an incredible... No, it's Raducanu. Honestly,
how can you say
this correctly?
A New Zealander telling an Australian how to pronounce something. That's a new low.
Well, anyway, you've won, so just zip it, Amanda. Well, actually, you can't zip it because you've got to tell us your Union jackass.
Yeah, a bit of respect here, Dan. Mine is going to be Meghan and Harry announcing, despite the fact they're terrified of coming to this country because of security worries, announcing weeks ahead of it that they're coming, but he's not going to see his brother, William, nor his sister-in-law, Kate. And all I can think is that's a really horrible thing for a brother to do. And I can hear the cartwheels Kate's doing around their cottage at this moment.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. And you're completely right on the security front. You know, why on earth, if you're so terrified, come when we don't want you here, firstly, but why announce it weeks in advance, alerting to everyone where you are. It's completely and utterly mad, just like everything else they do. Adam Brooks, your union.
Mine has to be the RAF for its racist and divisive recruiting policy. I was blown away by this, and I think it's utter nonsense.
Well, I hope you're not wanting to join the RAF, Adam, because you have no chance.
I might have to next year.
You're a straight white man.
He's very muscly, though.
Oh, thanks.
Doesn't matter. If you're straight and white, doesn't matter how muscly you are, you're not entering the RAF these days. What a disgrace. And Nigel Nelson, your nominee.
Mine must be Liz Truss for saying British workers need to graft war.
What a surprise. You could knock me down with a feather over that nominee, Nigel Nelson. Well, look, it's the double win for Amanda Platel tonight because, of course, the Union Jackasses, Harry and Meghan. And you know what, Amanda? I think this trip is actually about getting content for their desperate Netflix reality show. You know, that reality show, Amanda, that they promised us they were never going to do.
Yeah.
Until they realised they needed to earn some big bucks because Netflix isn't buying their woke.
But they're doing it for all their really dear charities, remember?
Oh, no, of course. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Amanda Platel, Adam Brooks, Nigel Nelson, my superstar panel. Thank you so much. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Of course, Headline is up now, though. Good night.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. There has been some intense thundery activity across parts of Kent in particular through Wednesday. Those storms now easing. Drier for a time overnight as a ridge of high pressure moves in, but the next weather systems are queuing up to come in, this time from the Atlantic. They're going to bring some rain, but nowhere near as lively as the thunderstorms that we've seen over the last few days. So the last of the showers moving out of the way of the far south and southeast overnight. Still a legacy of cloud cover for East Anglia, parts of the Midlands, southern England. Scotland, Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England sees increasing cloud through the night and some outbreaks of rain towards the end of the night. But in between, a slice of clear spells, and under those clear spells, feeling fresh as we start off Thursday, temperatures at around 10 or 11 Celsius, where we've got the cloud, 15 or 16 Celsius. And many places will be cloudy first thing. It'll be a damp start for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. That rain